This is North Texas football. I'm Bill Mercer.
I'm Bill Mercer.
I'm Bill Mercer.
I'm Bill Mercer.
Hi, I'm Bill Mercer.
I'm Bill Mercer. Nice to have you along.
Welcome to this exciting podcast with Mr. Bill Mercer. Today, we're excited to introduce the host of this interview, Mr. Gerald Brence and Mr. Kevin Long. Mr. Gerald Brence is a former Plano District Athletic Director and awarded Texas Coach of the Year twice and is a published author. He is here to guide the conversation. And Mr. Kevin Long is a freelance journalist in the Dallas area. He has spent the last 40 years working for TV stations and newspapers all over the country, and he will be asking important questions to our distinguished guest, Mr. Bill Mercer. Mr. Bill Mercer is best known as a play-by-play radio announcer for baseball, football, basketball, and wrestling. He was also a news reporter for Dallas, Texas television station KRLD, covering the assassination of President John F. Kennedy in 1963. So, without any further ado, please welcome our hosts, Mr. Gerald Brence and Mr. Kevin Long.
This is Gerald Brence, and along with Kevin Long and Jim Macaluso, and we are going to interview Bill Mercer here to my right, who has been in the media business for years and years in the Dallas area and has had just a fascinating life and just a very interesting person who thought we want to get this interview on videotape. And I'm going to turn it over to Kevin. He's going to do most of the questioning here. So Kevin, take it away.
Well, I'll tell you what, there are probably very few people who have been involved in such iconic American events as Bill.
Oh, thank you.
And we'll go over several of them, but we're going to start with one that still fascinates the American public, and that, of course, is the assassination of John Kennedy, which happened right here in Dallas. And you were a young reporter at the time in Dallas when all that was going on, and you were covering that. First question I have about that, what was your excitement level when you knew as a young reporter John Kennedy was coming to town and you're going to get a chance to cover it?
Well, let me say that I was doing baseball in the summer and working in the newsroom in the fall and winter.
Of course, another part of your career, Bill, was your association with broadcasting the Dallas Cowboys. Tom Landry, Tex Schramm, Clint Murkison, Don Meredith, all them.
Oh, yeah.
So, Kevin, take it away.
Well, I'll tell you what, that was not only the Cowboys, it was an iconic era of the Cowboys.
That's right.
Or as, Howard Cosell would put it, it was the era of Dandy Don, Bullet Bob, the Doomsday Defense. All that stuff, all those personalities were coming to play then, and you were there for 7 years. Now, I'll tell you what, we're going to ask you about a lot of those people, okay. But the first one is Coach Landry. Now, Coach Landry, he was made to be seem like the greatest guy in the world by some people, and then there are those who try to make him look like a real hypocrite, sanctimonious hypocrite. Where did you stand there? How did you feel about Coach Landry?
I guess I have the greatest respect for Tom. He was always good to me, except for one time, and that was a funny bit. But he's always been very cooperative, and I think he did as great a job as anybody could have done with that bunch of football players in the era they played, which I love better than the era going on now, but that's another thing. But Tom was generous and kind, and I know the players respected him, and what he said was law, and that's the way it should be, I guess. And when you're as knowledgeable as he is in his background with the Giants and all that, he won and deserved the right to be the best announcer in Cowboy history.
All right, talking about another guy who was a real character during that era, a guy who fascinated me, and that was Pete Gent.
Pete and I were real buddies. Pete was always in trouble about something, and he would come to me and say, I didn't do anything wrong, did I? I said, I don't know. What'd you do? And he was always trying hard, hurt himself playing as hard as he could, and he was a great character. And we'd sit around and during the riding out on the plane or something and talk, and he would tell me stories about. He was a basketball player,
Michigan State.
yeah, and a good one, and it just amused me. He got hurt so bad one time going up and crashing into the goalpost or something. He went to the hospital, and I went up a day or two later to see him. He said, "Hi, it's nice to see you. Nobody else has come up to see me from the Cowboys. You're my only friend." I said, I am not your only friend. But later, Pete Gent and I and somebody else, who was that? We had the Pete Gent show, and it was the craziest thing. It was a little extra, little 5-minute deal that ran on KRLD, and we would invite somebody up and not talk to them. Pete and I would talk, and like I think we had Meredith up one time, and just let him sit there. And we, at the end of the program, I said, "Thank you, Don, for coming in." "Oh, you bet. It was nice being here." That was the kind of silly stuff that Pete and I pulled off and did not get killed over. But he was a fun guy. And he was tried hard, but his body just couldn't handle all the beating that he took. But he was one of my best friends.
Let me ask you this. One, did you read the book North Dallas 40?
Yes, of course.
2, how accurate was it?
I think it's pretty accurate.
Is there anything in there that stood out to you as blatantly inaccurate? In other words, that no, that couldn't have happened.
No, it probably has, but it's been so long since I read it, I don't remember what it was. But I did read it and certainly enjoyed it from all the crazy stuff that they put in there.
Kind of made Coach Landry look a little hypocritical, though.
Yeah.
How did you feel about that?
Well, what you put in the book doesn't mean that's the way what you really mean. But yeah, it was a pretty hard hit.
All right, let's ask you about another person who was on that team, another personality who was on that team, and he got a lot of notoriety because they always billed him as the fastest man in the world.
Uh-oh.
And we're talking about, of course, Bob Hayes.
Bob Hayes.
Did you get to know him very well?
Oh,
Was he
yes,
like
really, very well. And he was basically a very nice guy to me and other people. And but he was very centered on him, which he's right to be. I never forget the pass that Meredith threw from the 2-yard line, I think it was, in Washington, and Pete and Bob caught it and ran all the way. That was one of the greatest plays. It was a first down after a kickoff, I think. And Meredith just went back and wound that arm up and threw it, and Bob, fastest man in the world, ran under it. Nobody could catch him. I'd never forget that play.
Let me ask you this. Now, Don Meredith was another person from that era. Is the real Don Meredith anything like he was portrayed in the movie North Dallas 40? This incredibly happy-go-lucky guy who, off the field, he's all partying and fun and all that. On the field, he's no-nonsense business.
I don't think he was no-nonsense business on the field particularly, and I don't think I went to a party that I ever saw him acting like an idiot. But he and I were very good friends. I'll tell you my favorite thing with Don, and we did a lot of stuff together, but I was down interviewing the pregame show one day, and I was kind of running late, and Meredith came through and said, "Bill, what the heck are you doing here?" I said, "I just did my pregame show." "Well, you shouldn't be here. Get out of here." And Meredith said, he was putting on his uniform. Meredith said, "What's wrong with him?" I said, "I don't know. He didn't like me being down here early." He said, "I'm going to give you something that will make you a hero." I said, "Okay." what is it? You know, and then all the time I've been a quarterback and you've been following the Cowboys, the first play of the game is the handoff to Perkins, right? I said, yeah. Well, you are going to tell the public that you've got a feeling that it isn't going to happen this time. And you don't know why, you don't know, but you're sure that they're going to have run a different play than Don Perkins the first time. I said, okay. And he said, you'll be famous. So I went up to the booth, we got on the air, and I said, now, fellas, I don't imagine that you think I'm clairvoyant or anything, but it's just something about this game and about talking to people. I don't think Meredith's going to hand off to Perkins in this one like he always does. Oh, what'd you get that? You must have. I said, no, it's just something I was thinking about, and it's about time that they change that. He said, well, we'll see. So sure enough, he drops back, fakes to Perkins, and throws a pass. Well, on the first break, they were screaming at me. Well, they screamed at me even during the broadcast. How did you know that? You didn't think that up by yourself. You had to have. So that was one of the fun things Meredith and I pulled off. And he was just a great guy. He was personable, fun. He may have, I never saw him at a party doing anything, but he always was very generous and very nice. And the day that I got on the elevator and he stepped on, he said, hey, Bill, I'm going to tell you something. I said, like the no handoff to Perkins, kind of like that. I've retired. I'm not going to be a Cowboy anymore. And that was.
Did you have much rapport with John Nyland?
Yeah, well, with all the guys. Everybody was not as deeply as I had with Jet and Meredith. But some of them, I knew Nyland well. I knew all of them well. Walt Garrison, the whole bunch. Walt was the toughest nut I ever saw. And Renfro was a neat guy. So, you know, they were all, it was a different era, and one I really wish we had again. The way the game was played then, the way the people reacted to the game, and it was so much fun, and I really enjoyed covering them.
I will get into a little bit of the, I guess you'll say, iconic event I was talking about, and that, of course, the Ice Bowl.
Okay.
Now, because let's face it, the Cowboys and the Packers had some real, I guess you'd say, classic games. Where,
yeah.
You know, supposedly Lombardi knew more about offense than anybody in the NFL. Landry Moore knew more about defense, and they tried to market, you know, that part. But the Ice Bowl was so unique from so many ways.
Sure
Starting today, they won't even play such a game. I mean, it'd be indoors. It'd be indoors. But what can you remember about going over to the game that day when, let's face it, the cold was outrageous? It was like 25 degrees below zero.
Well, I had a wake-up call that morning in the hotel, and the lady said, here's your wake-up call. Welcome to Green Bay. It's 30 below zero. Now that'll get your attention real fast. And I jumped up and put some clothes on and ran downstairs because I wanted to check outside. And I went through the swinging door. I went out and right back in. The wind was awful and the cold was terrible. And I thought, we're not going to play this game today, surely. So we had been out the night before. We got in the day before, of course. And a bunch of the media and I had been walking around town looking at Green Bay and had dinner and then that sort of thing. So it was very pleasant, about 35 degrees for winter, and that's nice. So the next morning we get dressed and then I put on all I had to wear, and I forgot my gloves. And with that exception, I was pretty well bundled up. We got to the field and the wind was just howling. and we went up to the press box, which was kind of like every other press box, and up to our radio booth, which was about as wide as that door over there. Just enough for 3 people to be in it, and one extra, the engineer. So we got in there, and God, it was cold. I said, anybody got coffee? Said we went down and tried coffee, and it's frozen by the time we get it out of the bottle. Nobody's getting anything. Is there any food? No, there's no food. There's nothing. So you got any water? It's frozen. So as we were talking, and the spotter and the engineer and I and Blackie Sherrod, who was my color analyst, and a great one, by the way, I looked up and I said, we got another problem here. Our wind is icing up the windows, and we're not going to be able to see. Sure enough, you could hardly see out then, and I couldn't get the windows open, which was probably a good thing, or we'd have died. But I'd like to have the windows open at the booth. So the spotter said, well, that's okay. I'll run over to the grocery store, or the service store, and get us 3 cans of de-icer. That should help. So he left. He said, I'll be right back. Well, 30 minutes later, he came staggering in, red face, frozen to the bone. And the poor guy was just hurting. So we took the first can and quickly spread it, and there it came. We had a window we could see. We used all 3 cans during the game. And it was it was something. Blake and I talked about it before we went on the air. I said, let's don't dwell on the weather. We're going to tell them what the weather is as we come on the air after we've established everything. And that the temperature was this morning and what it is now, 20 below 0. And we will update them with the temperature as we go through the game. But we're not going to dwell on, oh my God, the weather's awful and there's ice in it. We did say the field was icy. Oh, I forgot one thing. Lombardi had us out the day before to look at his field, which he had, and he had the engineer. He had put a heating system underneath the whole playing field, and it was going to keep it nice and soft and nice and ready in the winter to play football on. And I invited the engineer to come up at halftime. I never saw him. He didn't show up, but it was pretty well by the time of halftime, it was icing over, and nobody could, he couldn't get a hole in the turf. So it was, and that was it. And we did a straight up game, and occasionally Blackie would say it's 18 below 0 now, and then we'd go on. And we kept that up till the end of the game.
I guess probably there are a lot of plays in that game you remember. I'll assume, Bart sneaking in for the go-ahead touchdown with game on one.
Well, that's easy, yeah.
That's probably one you're going to remember. But when the Cowboys had him down there and Green Bay was having trouble sticking him in the end zone, did you hold out any hope that the Cowboys may hold him out of the end zone?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'm expecting the play that Meredith called where he dropped back, threw the ball out in the flat to his running back, and then they threw it downfield for the touchdown. And that was about the most involved play of the game, and it was a beautiful thing. But I still thought we had a chance until about the last 3 minutes when Starr took charge, and the field was ice, and people were falling down. Meredith fumbled, which he later can handle. Andre, I think it was Andre, picked up a fumble, ran it in for a Cowboy touchdown. But that drive that Bart Starr took that team down the field was a thing of beauty. And that last play, there was no way in the world they were going to stop it, even though the Cowboys said the left guard moved. And the officials were so frozen, they wanted to get out of there, I think. so they won the game. But it really didn't matter who won that game because it was a tremendous football game, played under conditions that no human should have been subject to. And it's been listed in some places as the third most exciting and best game ever. But I don't know if it's that good. But it was a game that I know as a broadcaster, I was totally involved in it and never thought we were losing, we Cowboys, and had this feeling that things were going to go right, and never really gave up.
Mm-hmm. We'll ask you one final question about this and then take another break and move to another subject matter. But one of the funnier stories I ever heard, I thought it was told by Herb Adderley. Herb Adderley was assigned to guard Bob Hayes in that game. And he was saying it was so funny because every time Hayes came out of the huddle, his hands were beneath his pants, unless it was going to be passed to him.
That's right.
So if they came out and his hands were in his pants, he either knew it was a run or was past somebody else.
Yeah.
Because he wondered, did you ever hear that one?
Oh, yeah, came out right away after that we talked, and even his own players knew that, so that was a funny deal. Bob was cold, for all that. I don't know how he managed to run around out there, or any of them is that fact. But that was, put his hands in his pants, bring him out, and he's going to try to catch a ball. And he never did very well.
Bill, your association with professional wrestling there are a lot of people want to hear you talk about that.
Of course.
Kevin, take it away.
Well, we'll start out with the Von Erichs because let's face it, another incredibly, highly unusual story.
Oh, it is.
Where I guess probably a lot of people don't know just what a powerhouse Fritz Von Erich had wrestling here in Dallas. Yeah. I know a little bit about it because I was very good friends with Terry Funk.
Oh, yeah.
And Terry Funk's father was the one who gave Jack Atkinson or Fritz Von Erich the model, the blueprint of how to go about marketing wrestling here and going about putting it on. And they put on an incredible show. And whenever I guess that sports arena was having wrestling, it was chock full of people.
The old sportatorium, yes, it was. Early on, people actually wore suits and the ladies wore dresses. And then time went on and everybody just dressed. But and then as the Von Erich boys came along, that solidified that enjoyment of the Cowboys, the wrestlers on Von Erich's. David came first. He was a student at North Texas, very good basketball player. His father just took him out of school and made a wrestler out of him. The second one was Kevin, and Kevin was a student at North Texas, a good running back. He was pulled out of school and made a wrestler. And that's the two and then the third one was the shot put specialist, and he went to University of Houston. And and he was probably the best built of the others.
Talking about Kerry?
Huh?
Are we talking about Kerry Von Erich?
Kerry Von Erich, thank you. I had a brain twinge there. Kerry Von Erich, and then there was Mike, and then there was a younger one. But Kerry was quite an athlete, a discus and throwing that stuff, and probably could have made the Olympics had he stayed in school. But we had one problem: he wasn't able to do the work in the colleges. He could not participate in the academics very well. So those guys started and just built it up. David was this tall, thin one, and Kevin, who's still alive, is more. The guy who played him in the movie was perfect, and it was a story of a family They lost a little boy back in the north when they were first starting. Fritz and his wife, and so they had 6 kids and 6 boys, and so they had the 5 that they put into the ring here, and the story. Of course, I got to push something else. The story is in the movies out now. The Iron Claw, which people say is pretty good. I saw it. I thought it was good, but how the people did not know the treatment that the Von boys took from their father, and the way that things were set up. So, and there was a way in wrestling that you can set up a championship, if not just a while, briefly, which is needed. And when David died in Japan of some ailment, we had a meeting. I was at the meeting of the family out on the lake by their farm, and they decided that in order to honor David, they had to have a championship, and they had to get a championship. And naturally, the second one in was Kevin, who had been there the longest, and a great friend of David's, close friend of David Von Erich. And Fritz picked Kerry instead, and that was one of the first put-downs of Kevin that Fritz handed him. So they won the championship, and a few days later, out someplace else, the guy got the championship back. That was the way it worked in wrestling, professional wrestling. I'm giving away some secrets, I guess. Most people understand it's all been decided, and so they were all. After that, it was just after David was gone, everybody took part every week in town or out of town in promoting wrestling, but promoting the Von Erichs really. And until Kevin ran into the drug problem and knew he was going to be going to jail or incarcerated, and shot himself, which you'll see in the movie. Mike was the least, well, he shouldn't have been a wrestler anyway. He wasn't very big, but he got awfully sick and almost died, but he survived and built himself up as much as he could, and then he was back wrestling. And according to the note he left it on the White Rock Lake, he just couldn't live up to the Von Erich standards, and he took poison and died.
You know, clearly, you were very, very close to that family.
I was.
And I've never heard of anything like that. To anybody, to any family, in or out of sports. As all this was happening, and one young Von Erich kid after another is dying for all kinds of bizarre ways, what's going through your head? What are you thinking?
Something terribly wrong in that family. And certainly something, a family without real leadership and honesty. And then the kid killed himself later. So 3 killed themselves. 1 died, and that left Kevin. And Kevin never got the shot at the championship that he should have had, if there was one. that's what I like about the movie. It doesn't pull any punches. It tells the truth.
Did you have a real affinity for wrestling, though, would you say?
When I started, it was funny. I did wrestling first time in Muskogee on radio, and I'd never done it before. And I found out it was fun, and I did it like a football game. I just called play-by. I knew the plays and knew the holes and all that. And then I came to Dallas to do wrestling, and Tuesday Night Live. And I really got to a point where I wasn't in love with it, but I enjoyed it because it was a contest I never want. Sometimes they wanted me to come into the office and listen to the plans. I said, no, I don't want to hear that. I want to react. I want to react to the whatever happens, and I can do it. So no, I don't want to know. But I really, it was like I told some people, it was a hobby. I did all the regular football, baseball stuff, but wrestling was a hobby. And it turned out to be, I guess, the biggest hobby I had, because I still get to hear from people. And I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the good times, the bad times.
You know, because I've got a bit of a background in wrestling too. As I told you, I was good friends with all the Funks up in Amarillo.
Yeah.
I went to college. I remember.
Well, they were great.
Oh, they were awesome.
Yeah.
They were awesome. But, you know, here is, I guess, the big white elephant in the room. Let's face it, it's all staged.
Yeah.
And whatnot. And, of course, they didn't want to admit any of that.
No, they never would.
And so what I did when I was in college, and we used to go to the wrestling matches, you know, we used to get kind of rowdy, like yell at the refs, come on, ref, he got his shorts. You can't let him do that, you know, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And then when I became a sportscaster, I kind of played along with it.
Yeah.
For example, do you remember a wrestler named Nikolai Volkov?
No.
Okay, he was a Russian guy. But anyhow, I remember after one of the things we asked him, you know, in an interview, he lost, and we asked him if there's any chance he could get exiled to Siberia and things like that.
Yeah.
You know, things like that, to kind of play along with it, because let's face it, it was incredible entertainment, and I never could figure out if the people in the stands really believed it was real, or they knew it wasn't real, but they were still entertained by it.
It was still entertaining. Most people, I think a lot of people thought it was real, and probably still do. One of my favorites too was the Andre the Giant, who was I shook hands with him, and it was like my whole hand up to my wrist vanished. And he was the nicest guy, just the sweetest man. And he met my wife and my daughter, and they were really impressed with the enormous size of him. And it was, the things that they planned were just amazing. We were going to be in Africa one time, and I can't remember the black wrestler's name, but he was, I was going to interview him down in the area of the African plains, or wherever we were. So it was down by the Trinity River, which was our Africa. But the grass was high, and so they shot it well. But we had a tremendous production crew. So I go out to interview him, and he comes over and he stumbles and pushes me down, and I fall flat on my back. and so he came over and helped me. Or no, he didn't. He just said, "Get up, you're supposed to be broadcasting." And I said, "Okay, just a minute, I think I stumbled." He apologized every time I saw him. "Bill, I'm still sorry for knocking you down in the Trinity River." It was fun.
Well, I'll tell you what, we've gone close to an hour here, and we're about concluding this, but there's one subject. I'm going to let Coach Brence ask a few questions about this. Your background in the military was also quite impressive.
Oh,
Coach, why don't you?
I didn't do anything much.
Well, just people are interested in that.
Yeah.
That when all that went down and how that all went down. Just give us a little short story. Brief.
Okay. I was 17 years old in 1943. I just graduated from high school. All my friends who were a year older, because I jumped a grade, I had already gone, so I had nobody in town. So I went over and signed up, which was, you had to have your mother and father sign. And I wasn't sure my mother would sign, but my dad talked her into it for some reason. Anyway, I went in the Navy. I didn't also being in high school like you, I couldn't do science and math. I was just good in English and history. So I didn't know if I was going to do anything. But I passed the test and was sent to signal school where you do semaphore, and run the lights and all that stuff. And that was great. I got to go to school. And then when I went overseas, I followed, the first thing was 12 of us out of the class were sent up to Oceanside, California and joined the Marines, or they joined us anyway. And we had to go out and practice landing with lights and stuff. And we did that for about a month, and then they said, oh, we don't need you anymore. So I was back in the Navy. And then they sent me overseas, and I got on the ship, the Rixie transport ship, and did the invasion of Guam with a bunch of good buddies of mine from the Marine Corps. And then I came back to Hawaii, and I was transferred to the LCI 439, which was originally a troop transport, but they made it into a rocket ship or gunboat, and ours was a gunboat, but we fired rockets. So I went to Leyte Luzon at Okinawa on the LCI. It got hit at Guam and lost a couple of guys, but never got hit again. And we were through kamikazes the whole bit. So it was a pretty exciting little war out there.
When the war ended, could you tell us a little bit just about when you knew that the war was over?
Oh, when celebrated, we were in Pearl Harbor. We just got back from Okinawa, and we came back from Kauai with a little restaurant, R&R, and we got back into Pearl, and all the celebrations started. Dropped the bombs, and we figured it was over. Of course, they hadn't signed it yet, and got that place. Pearl Harbor went nuts. They were firing every rocket they could find, and so when they finally did say it's over, they've signed, started sending guys home, and but the ship was going to stay there, and I was a second-class signaler, really a first-class level, but that was because of the buddy of mine who was one with me. And one of the officers came up to me and said, Bill, this is after the war, if you'll stay on the ship, we'll make you first class. And I thought, if I were staying in the Navy, I might do that. But I said, no thanks, this is as far as I need to go, and I went home. But then they lost my records out of the ship, and we were sent to Farragut, Idaho, and spent 3 or 4 months there. So finally I went home. But it was 1946, I guess, when we went home. But I loved the Navy. I loved being in it. I loved what we did. I guess love for a war is not what I meant, but just in being involved in the ship and the regulation and the guys on it. And we had a good time and terrific times and real uncertain times, but I never lost my faith in the country or the Navy. And I almost went back in, but my wife by then said, no way. So she stopped me and we didn't go, and I went on to be a broadcaster.
Well, we really want to thank you for your time today. It was really fun. We really enjoyed it. Of course, Bill was at UN North Texas for years, and the press box is named after Bill Mercer.
Thanks to my students who did that.
Yeah. You might just want to talk about that just a little bit. Some of the guys that you had, real quick.
Well, Followell is one of them. He does NWA. God, now the names are slipping. Craig Way, who is the University of Texas broadcaster, and other guys around.
Dunham Miller,
George and
Craig.
Yeah.
Craig,
Yeah.
So, that class produced a lot of outstanding broadcasters, and I think at one time we had the best broadcast school in the country in North Texas, but it didn't last long because everything changed. I went off to the big time.
Well, every time I'm around those guys, they just think the world of you, and they love to talk.
Oh, I know.
They love to talk about you, and
They call me, and Greg Miller came over with his wife and child and brought me an organ, and I have an organ sitting on my table from them. So it's a fraternity of what we call the Mercer Mafia. That was coined by a guy in the Fort Worth Star-Telegram. So we're all still the Mercer Mafia.
Well, we really want to thank you. You did a great job, and we appreciate it. And we'll sign off from here. And thanks again, Bill.
Well, you're welcome, and I thank you guys for having me. And good luck out there.
Thanks, Kevin and Jim. Thank you very much.